Have you ever felt like you're running in circles, trapped in a loop with no way out, despite telling everyone how you feel? You might think you're releasing pressure, but in truth, you're quietly feeding a sense of helplessness inside your mind. And the most dangerous part? Most people don't even realize they're doing it, a silent habit that's sabotaging their potential. Bit by bit. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most destructive yet overlooked habits: emotional dumping. You know exactly what I mean. It's the pattern of constantly venting your problems, complaining about every frustration, and sharing even the smallest inconvenience with anyone willing to listen. In the moment, it feels like relief, but in reality, you're draining your inner strength. Every time you do it, you're handing over control of your emotional state. You're not resolving anything. You're deepening your sense of powerlessness. Think of your brain like a GPS. It doesn't judge, it simply listens to what you tell it most. So if you're constantly repeating how tired you are, how unfair life is, how stuck you feel, your brain doesn't just hear you. It believes you. It starts steering your thoughts and perceptions through that lens. Your thoughts loop, your emotions spiral, and without realizing it, your identity becomes rooted in your problems. Not your goals, not your potential, not your power. Let me be clear, I'm not saying you should bottle up your feelings or fake that everything's okay. No, what I'm saying is, you need to be intentional. When you speak about your problems, are you trying to process and solve them, or are you just looking for sympathy? Because if it's the second one, it's time to get real with yourself. That quick hit of validation might feel good for 5 minutes. But what happens afterward? Nothing changes. You're still stuck. You just spent all your energy repeating your story instead of rewriting it. Emotional dumping is like playing the same sad song on repeat and expecting your life to magically start dancing to a new rhythm. It doesn't work like that. You're not moving forward. You're rehearsing your pain. And the more you rehearse it, the better you get at staying exactly where you are. But you weren't born to stay stuck. You were born to evolve, to rise, to lead yourself out of the darkness. Real strength isn't about how loudly you complain. It's about how silently you begin working through it. You don't need to post about your pain every day. You don't need to call 5 friends to relive the worst moments of your day over and over again. What you do need to do is ask yourself, what's one small action I can take right now to shift this? That's what pulls you out of emotional chaos. Not more talking, not more venting. Action. Because every time you emotionally dump, you reinforce the belief that you can't handle your life without someone else stepping in to save you. And that's a lie. You don't need saving. You need strategy. You need movement. And most importantly, you need to remember that the most powerful person in your life is you. So, if action is the key, how do we begin shifting from emotion to momentum? Let's dive into that in page 2. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with page 2 or help record this as a voiceover script. Remember this, in the previous section, we talked about how emotional dumping isn't a solution. It's a mental trap that pulls you deeper into negativity instead of helping you rise above it. And now, it's time we shift focus, from emotion to action. If you truly want to feel better, start by thinking differently. Stop replaying the same old problems like a worn-out tape. Begin building a new mental pattern, one where you remind yourself, I acknowledge the problem, and now I focus on the solution. That tiny shift in mindset, even just a small one, can completely redirect the course of your life. Because here's the truth. Life is already hard. We're all dealing with our own silent battles. But the difference doesn't lie in who has the toughest problems. The real difference lies in how you respond to them. The people who grow, the ones who build lives they're proud of, they're not the ones constantly complaining. They're not handing out negativity like candy on Halloween. Instead, they treat their time and energy like gold. They are intentional with where they place their focus. Because they understand. Every time you talk about what's going wrong without working on what could go right, you're taking a step backward. Think about it. If you spend just 10 minutes a day venting, complaining, or replaying pain, and you don't pair it with any action, how much time do you lose in a week? In a month? In a year? How many moments could have been used to build something better instead? Personal growth doesn't come from getting better at telling sad stories. It comes from the ability to manage your thoughts. Choose your actions. And keep moving forward even when your heart feels heavy. So how do you start rebuilding your mindset? How do you create a mental reflex that's healthier, stronger, and aligned with the life you actually want to live? The answer lies in page 3. Previously, we talked about reclaiming your power through action, not emotion. Now, it's time to put that into practice. Because awareness is the first step. Ownership is the second. So here's your challenge. The next time you catch yourself spiraling into a rant or unloading your stress just for the sake of being heard, pause. Just pause, and ask yourself a simple, honest question. Is this helping me move forward? If the answer is no, it's time to redirect. Even the smallest step toward progress is more powerful than 1,000 perfectly worded complaints. You can own your story, but more importantly, you must own how that story ends. And that shift begins the moment you stop pouring energy into emotional dumping and start channeling it into focused, courageous, solution-oriented action. Most people walk around thinking their pain is somehow uniquely unbearable, that their problems are heavier than everyone else's. And yes, your pain is valid. Your stress is real, but so is everyone else's. Everyone is carrying something. That's the hard truth no one wants to admit. You may be looking for someone who can sit with you, truly feel what you're going through, carry part of your emotional weight, but the reality is, most people are barely keeping up with their own. That's not cruelty. It's not indifference. It's simply human nature in a world that's constantly demanding more from all of us. People are juggling bills, careers, deadlines, health scares, strained relationships, aging parents, sleepless nights, and broken dreams. And yet, somehow, we expect them to drop everything and dive headfirst into our emotional storm. So when your venting is met with silence, or quick replies, or distant energy, it's not because people don't care. It's because they're drowning in their own chaos. The truth is, the more you expect others to carry your emotional weight, the more disappointment you invite into your life. You start to feel ignored, unseen, maybe even betrayed. But often, the problem isn't them. It's the expectation you placed on them without realizing it. If you walk into every relationship hoping someone else will shrink your pain, you're setting yourself up for constant abandonment. Because you're seeking comfort from people who, quite frankly, aren't equipped to give it in the way you want. They don't live in your mind. They don't feel your feelings. They're not going to stop everything because your world is shaking. And even if someone does listen, even if they show up fully for you, there's still one thing that remains true. No one will ever care about your life as much as you do. They can support you, they can encourage you, but the responsibility to heal, to grow, to move, that belongs to you. It always has. This realization isn't meant to isolate you. It's meant to wake you up. You've got to stop putting your emotional well-being in someone else's hands. You've got to stop expecting others to fully understand, because they won't. And truthfully, they don't have to. That's not their role. Your role is to understand yourself, to sit with your pain, to process your own thoughts, to stand back up, even when it hurts, and decide that no matter how messy things are, you are the one who's going to clean it up. And when you stop expecting others to hold space for every meltdown, to be your permanent emotional rescue team, you release them. But more importantly, you release yourself. You stop waiting. You stop depending. You stop handing your peace to people who never asked for it in the first place. Let's be real here. People want results, not repetition. They want to see you grow, not hear the same struggle every week. Because when all you do is talk about what's wrong, you don't just drain yourself. You become emotionally exhausting to be around. But here's the good news. There's a way to break this cycle, for good. A way to reconnect with others, without losing yourself. And that's exactly what we'll explore in page 4. In the last section, we uncovered a hard truth. The more you rely on others to hold your pain, the more powerless you become. And the moment you stop expecting someone to save you, that's when real growth begins. Not because you're unlovable, not because you're unworthy, but simply because you're stuck. And no one, not your friend, your partner, your boss, or even your therapist, can push you out of that place of stuckness but you. So the next time you catch yourself about to offload your frustrations onto someone else's shoulders, pause and ask yourself, What am I truly hoping to get out of this? If the answer is attention, validation, or sympathy, it's time to shift. Because what you really need isn't someone to feel sorry for you. It's not pity. It's a challenge. And most of the time, that challenge has to come from within. There's absolutely nothing wrong with needing help. Let's be clear on that. But don't confuse seeking support with wanting to be saved. There's a massive difference. Support is a steady hand guiding you as you walk. Saving is expecting someone else to carry you when you refuse to take a step. And here's the truth that might sting a little. No one is coming to rescue you. But guess what? That's not a tragedy, it's a gift. Because it means the power has always been yours. You are far more capable than you've given yourself credit for. Once you truly accept that everyone is battling something, and that no one owes you their emotional bandwidth, you begin to develop something essential: emotional independence. You learn how to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. You learn how to weather your internal storms rather than waiting for someone else to calm them. You stop resenting people for not being who you needed them to be. And in that space, you find freedom. Freedom to own your healing. Freedom to take back control. Freedom to rise. There's a huge misunderstanding out there, one that keeps so many people stuck. Talking about your problems is not the same as doing something about them. It's not. Venting and solving are two completely different roads. And sadly, too many people get stuck walking in circles, mistaking motion for movement. Sure, you can tell your best friend how overwhelmed you are. You can cry to your coworkers, post a heartfelt rant on social media, and feel a sense of release when someone responds with, "Yeah, that sucks. But let me ask you this." When that conversation ends, what's actually changed? The situation? Still the same. Your choices? Still unclear. Your next step? Still waiting. And worst of all, the emotional energy that could have been used for action has been spent on repetition. Venting is emotional fast food. It gives you a quick emotional hit, but it leaves you empty. It doesn't nourish you. It doesn't empower you. And if you do it often enough, it becomes addictive, a habit, a loop. You start seeking people not to grow, but to release pressure. You're managing stress instead of managing strategy. And slowly, you lose the very muscle that builds change: action. Because yes, venting feels productive. You're engaging. You're expressive. You're emotionally raw. But what you're not doing is solving anything. You're not building resilience. You're not gaining skills. You're not creating momentum. Here's the cold truth. If you're not moving toward a solution, you're just rehearsing the problem. And the more you rehearse it, the more deeply it imprints on your mind. It starts to feel bigger, heavier, harder to overcome. When you condition yourself to voice frustration without action, your brain learns a dangerous lesson: that talking is the goal. But talking isn't the goal. Change is. Progress is. And those only come when you shift from, "Why is this happening?" to, "What now?" That single question has power. It interrupts the spiral. It brings clarity. It reroutes your thinking from being stuck in the problem to building the solution. Now, does this mean you should never talk about your struggles? Of course not. We all need emotional space. We all need to process. But there's a big difference between processing and rehearsing. Processing is when you unpack what's happening so you can figure out what to do next. It's temporary. It's intentional. It's a step toward clarity. Rehearsing, on the other hand, is when you revisit the same pain on a loop, hoping that the story alone will bring you peace. But it won't. It never has. And it never will. So, how do we begin breaking that pattern? How do we start shifting from emotional release to emotional resilience? Let's get into that in page 5. Let me know when you're ready for page 5. I've got it lined up for you. In the last part, we uncovered the danger of rehearsing your pain instead of processing it. Now it's time to talk about how to break that pattern and reclaim control of your story. If you truly want to change your life, it starts with one powerful decision. Interrupt the pattern. Stop repeating the same narrative. And start writing a new one, intentionally, consciously, and with purpose. That means becoming more aware of when and why you speak. Before you launch into a rant or vent your stress, pause. Ask yourself, am I saying this to move forward, or just to feel better for a moment? If the answer is the latter, Then stop. Take a breath. Choose a better direction. Maybe that means grabbing a journal and writing your thoughts down. Maybe it means going for a walk. Maybe it means sitting in the discomfort instead of escaping it. But what it definitely does not mean is pouring your energy into the same dead-end conversations. Ones that do nothing but recycle the problem. Because here's the truth. You're capable of solving more than you give yourself credit for. But you'll never unlock that potential if you're always turning outward, hoping someone else will relieve your pressure. Real growth begins when you turn inward, when you ask yourself the hard questions like, what can I actually control in this moment? What's one small step I can take right now to make progress? Who can genuinely help me, not just listen, but help me build a plan? That's where your energy belongs. Not in endless rants, not in repetitive venting, but in strategy and movement. And let's be honest, venting doesn't even bring lasting relief. Sure, it feels good for 5 minutes. But afterwards, you often feel more drained, more frustrated, and more powerless. Why? Because you're reliving the problem without resolving it. You're stirring the emotional pot but never serving a solution. That's not emotional healing. That's emotional burnout disguised as release. So the next time you're tempted to unload, ask yourself this: do I want to feel better for 5 minutes? Or do I want to change my life for good? Because if what you really want is transformation, then stop talking and start doing. Solutions don't come out of your mouth. They come from your mindset. They come from the actions you're bold enough to take. Every time you speak about how unfair life is, or how exhausted you feel, or how nothing ever works out, you're not just sharing your story. You're training people how to see you. You're teaching them how to treat you. Whether you realize it or not, your words become the filter others use to understand you. If you always lead with how overwhelmed you are, how unlucky life feels, how others constantly let you down, guess what? People start to believe that version of you. Not because they want to judge you, but because that's the version you've repeated the most. Words have power. Repetition shapes identity. If you consistently present yourself as the person who's struggling, eventually, even you will forget you were ever capable of thriving. You start to build a personal brand around being the victim. The one who's always stuck. The one who never catches a break. And that mindset? It's dangerous. Because once you lock yourself into that identity, it's incredibly hard to escape. Not just in other people's minds, but in your own. People respond to how you show up. If you carry yourself like someone who's broken, lost, or defeated, others will unconsciously treat you that way. They'll stop offering opportunities. They'll stop challenging you. They may even start avoiding you, not because they don't care, but because your presence becomes emotionally heavy. And let's be honest, emotional heaviness without action is exhausting. You become someone others feel like they have to manage, not someone they admire. Not because you're a bad person, but because you're radiating helplessness instead of hope. And that changes how the world reacts to you. So ask yourself, what message am I sending with the way I speak about myself and my life? Am I reinforcing strength, or helplessness? Am I showing people my power, or constantly broadcasting my pain? Pain is a natural part of life. We all face difficult seasons. But the key is in how we communicate that pain. Are you speaking from a place of growth and ownership, or from a loop of blame and hopelessness? Because the moment you show up as someone who owns their struggle, who sees the hardship but refuses to stay down, everything changes. People start listening differently. They stop pitying you. They start respecting you. And that's the power we'll talk about next. How to shift your energy from being heard to being respected. Let's dive into that in page 6. Previously, we talked about how the way you speak shapes how others see you, and more importantly, how you see yourself. Now let's go one step deeper, from being heard to being respected. Respect doesn't come from complaining. Respect comes from rising, from showing that no matter how heavy the storm, you're not waiting for rescue, you're navigating your way through it. That subtle shift in energy? It's everything. It changes how people respond to you. It changes how you feel about yourself. You move from being seen as someone weighed down by life, to someone growing through it. And when that shift happens, people take notice. They respect your resilience. They admire your focus. They start seeing you as someone who doesn't just talk about strength, but embodies it. You gain respect by showing, not telling. By showing that even when life gets hard, you keep going. By choosing your words wisely, not as weapons of despair, but as tools of purpose and direction. Because when you speak from a place of grounded strength, even in tough times, people listen differently. They lean in. They follow your lead. They begin to treat you as someone who's capable, determined, and moving forward. That's what happens when you start taking control of your narrative. You can either let your circumstances define you, or you can define yourself in spite of them. And that starts with being intentional about your language, your presence, and the story you're choosing to tell. Ask yourself honestly, if someone met you for the very first time today, and all they had were your words, what kind of person would they believe you are? Would they hear someone crushed by life? Or someone courageously rebuilding? Would they meet a victim, or a leader? Because the truth is, people can only reflect back what you give them. If you want to be seen as powerful, grounded, and rising, then speak like someone who's reclaiming their power. This doesn't mean faking happiness. It doesn't mean hiding your pain or pretending you're okay when you're not. It means showing up in a way that honors your growth, without letting your wounds become your identity. It's about speaking with intention, not reaction, purpose, not pity. When you start owning your role as the author of your story, people stop treating you like a side character, and start seeing you as the main character you've always been. The way you speak about yourself matters. So stop retelling the story of your limitations, and start living the story of your rise. Because there's something incredibly powerful about learning to sit with your pain, without immediately needing to narrate it to the world. And no, that doesn't mean you're ignoring how you feel. It doesn't mean you're suppressing anything. It means you're giving yourself something far more valuable: space. Space to process. Space to understand what's really going on, before running to hand it off to someone else. That kind of inner clarity, that deep self-awareness, that's what separates the ones who stay stuck from the ones who rise. In today's world, we're encouraged to overshare, post your breakdown, go live with your pain, tell everyone what's falling apart. But what if you didn't? What if, instead of reacting out loud every time something went wrong, you got still and started listening inward? Because here's the truth: clarity doesn't come from noise. It comes from stillness. When you're constantly venting, you're just reacting. You're offloading, not understanding. But when you sit in the silence, when you allow yourself to feel before you speak, you begin to uncover the message beneath the pain. Because pain isn't just there to punish you. It's a messenger. It's pointing to something that needs your attention. Maybe it's a boundary you've ignored, a change you've avoided, a truth you've been scared to face. But here's the thing: you'll never hear what it's trying to tell you if you're always talking over it. The people who grow the most are the ones who learn to sit in discomfort and ask, what is this trying to show me? And here's the kicker: you don't need an audience for every emotion. In the next part, we'll talk about exactly how to turn that emotional stillness into forward movement, and what it means to truly take your power back. Let's move into page 7. In the last part, we explored the quiet strength that comes from self-awareness, from choosing reflection over reaction. Now, let's go deeper into what happens when you stop broadcasting your struggle and start owning your growth. Not everything needs to be processed out loud. Some of the most profound breakthroughs? They happen in silence. In those still moments where you stop trying to explain your pain and start listening to it. Where you shift from constantly reacting to intentionally reflecting. That's when you move from powerless to powerful. That's when you stop being a victim of your circumstances and start becoming a student of your experience. Let's be clear: talking isn't the problem. There is nothing wrong with reaching out when you genuinely need perspective, connection, or guidance. But there's a difference between reaching out for support and using conversation to avoid doing the real inner work. Because here's the truth: emotional growth doesn't have to be loud. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like you, alone in your room, sitting on the edge of your bed, breathing through the urge to text someone about your frustration, and instead, choosing to feel it, letting the emotion rise, letting it pass, without outsourcing your pain for validation. That is self-leadership. That is emotional maturity. And yes, it's hard. Because we're conditioned to run from discomfort. We grab distractions. We chase reassurance. We scroll. We vent. We escape. Because we want to feel better now. But real strength? Real strength is built in the waiting. In the pause. In the willingness to let it hurt, without numbing it. Without avoiding it. And without pushing that burden onto someone else. That's where your mind gets sharper. That's where your emotional intelligence grows. That's where you begin to realize. Most of the things you were desperate to talk about didn't need to be talked about at all. They just needed time. They needed space. They needed silence. You start to understand the difference between pain that needs to be expressed, versus pain that just needs to be held. Not buried, not ignored, just allowed to breathe quietly. You become more selective with your words. More intentional with your energy. And that shift? It changes everything. Suddenly, you're no longer the person who vents at every inconvenience. You become the one who thinks before they speak. The one who processes before they react. The one who walks into conversations not with emotional chaos, but with clarity. People notice that. They respect that. Because you're not just showing up, you're showing up grounded. And something interesting starts to happen. People begin to seek your presence, not out of obligation, but because it feels different. You're no longer the emotional weight in the room. You become someone others look to, not someone they feel like they have to carry. And the best part? You stop feeling like a hostage to your emotions. You stop riding the highs and lows like waves you can't control. You begin to feel in charge. Yes, you still have bad days. Yes, you still feel pain. But you've built an anchor inside yourself, something steady. Something that isn't tied to anyone else's validation, reaction, or presence. So, next time you feel overwhelmed, pause. Don't rush to post it. Don't call 5 people just to get it off your chest. Sit with it, breathe, and ask yourself, what's this really about? And trust, you are strong enough to handle whatever comes up. You don't have to say it all. You just have to hear yourself. That's where healing begins. That's where transformation starts. That's how you begin to lead yourself through anything life throws your way. Because people aren't drawn to volume. They're not pulled in by drama or noise. They're drawn to energy. Not just any energy, but that steady, forward-moving energy. The kind that says, I'm going somewhere. I may not be there yet, but I'm building. I'm moving. I'm owning this journey. Think about the kind of person you're naturally drawn to. It's not the one who's always venting. It's the one who radiates purpose, even if their life isn't perfect yet. And here's the secret. That energy doesn't come from a flawless life. It comes from ownership. When you stop announcing your problems and start owning them, people begin to see you differently. You become magnetic. Not because everything is great, but because you're clearly in control of your mindset. You're no longer defined by what's happened to you. You're defined by what you're doing about it. And in today's world, that is rare. That kind of personal responsibility speaks volumes, even when you say nothing at all. It says, I've got this. And that's what earns trust. That's what earns respect. Because the moment you stop constantly talking about your problems, you stop leaking your power. You keep your energy. You protect your peace. And in the next section, we'll talk about how to turn that energy into momentum, so you're not just surviving emotionally, but building a life that truly reflects your inner strength. Let's move on to page 8. In the last part, we talked about protecting your energy, about staying grounded and focused instead of leaking your power through over-explaining. Now, let's talk about where that reclaimed energy should go, into action. Because once you stop wasting your energy on trying to get people to understand you, to feel sorry for you, or to validate your pain, something powerful happens. You begin pouring that energy into healing, into creating, into solving problems, into becoming. And that's when your presence shifts. You walk into a room, and people feel something different. They don't need to know your whole backstory. They don't need the details, because the way you carry yourself already tells a story. A story of quiet strength, of direction, of someone who isn't just surviving, but doing something about it. Let's be clear. Confidence doesn't mean pretending everything's perfect. It means knowing, deep down, that no matter what life throws your way, you are capable of walking through it. And that kind of confidence? It shows up in how you speak, in the way you move, in the silence between your words. You don't need to prove anything, because your energy speaks louder than your voice ever could. This isn't about being fake. It's about being intentional. You're not denying your struggles. You're choosing to handle them in a way that protects your peace, and the peace of the people around you. That's maturity. Immature energy constantly craves attention. It needs the world to see how hard life is, so it can feel seen, validated, and heard. But mature energy knows that not everyone needs access to your pain. Healing can happen privately. Breakthroughs can unfold quietly. Some of the most powerful transformations don't need an announcement. You don't have to explain every step. You just have to keep taking them. And people will notice. Opportunities find you, not because you beg for them, but because your presence says, I'm ready. Relationships get healthier, not because you need saving, but because you show up whole, grounded, capable. And something else shifts, too. How you see yourself. When you stop talking about your problems all the time, you stop identifying with them. You stop telling yourself the same story of being stuck, broken, or defeated. And instead, you begin to adopt a new identity. Someone who's learning, growing, evolving. Over time, that narrative becomes real. You're no longer someone with a list of struggles. You're someone with a track record of rising. Now think about it. How much time have you spent explaining yourself? Trying to justify your pain? Convincing others to see what you're going through? What if you redirected that time into building something better? What if you used it to create healthy habits? To pursue goals that remind you of your strength? That's the energy shift that changes lives. It takes you from passive to powerful, from reactive to intentional, from needing to be understood to simply being. You don't need everyone to know your story. You need to live it in a way that speaks for itself. Let your growth do the talking. Let your actions speak louder than your pain. Let your results become the proof. That's how you build credibility. That's how you earn trust. That's how you make an impact, without even raising your voice. People feel when you've done the work. They sense when you're no longer looking for pity, but instead, standing rooted in purpose. That kind of energy? It moves things. It draws people in. It changes the room. And ultimately, it changes your life. So stop explaining. Stop venting. Stop trying to get everyone to care. Channel that energy inward. Build yourself up. Let your presence say what words never could. Now here's something most people won't admit. The more you talk about your problems, the more power you give them. It's not just about what you're saying to others. It's about what your own brain is hearing. Over and over again. Every time you repeat that same story. How things went wrong. How someone let you down. How life feels unfair. Your subconscious hears it as confirmation. This is who I am. This is my life. But guess what? That's not your truth, unless you keep reinforcing it. In the next section, we'll uncover how your words shape your identity, and how to rewrite that internal script, for good. Let's move to page 9. In the last section, we talked about channeling your energy inward, into growth, healing, and intentional action. Now let's look at one of the biggest reasons people stay stuck. The way they speak about their pain. Because here's the truth. When you keep talking about your problems over and over, they stop being just experiences. They start becoming part of your identity. What once happened to you starts becoming who you believe you are. And that's where things get dangerous. You're no longer just struggling with something. You're carrying it like a name tag. A label. A role you didn't ask for. But when you start accepting every time you say, I'm always like this. This always happens to me. People always treat me this way. The more you repeat it, the more it roots itself in your mind. And eventually, you become attached to the hurt version of yourself, even if deep down, you don't want to be. So, if you truly want to reclaim your life, it starts right here, with this understanding. Your problems are real, yes, but they are not your identity. They are events. They are situations. They are moments in time. But they are not who you are. However, if you keep rehearsing those problems, out loud or silently in your head, they begin to harden, like cement, into your self-concept. They become the default script your mind starts to live by. That's why silence is sometimes more powerful than speaking. Because the moment you stop repeating the same old story, you create space to write a new one. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about pretending everything's fine. It's not about ignoring your pain or bottling up your emotions. It's about making a crucial distinction. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You can say, "That happened to me," without saying, "That defines me." You can feel disappointed without becoming a disappointed person. You can experience failure without labeling yourself a failure. That difference? That's everything. The real shift begins when you stop identifying with what's broken and start identifying with what's possible. Your energy shouldn't live in the past. It should live in the future. In what's next, not in what happened. Because the moment you shift your focus from what hurt you to where you're headed is the moment you start reclaiming your power. That's the exact moment where growth begins. One of the biggest lies we tell ourselves is that constantly talking about something will make us feel better. And sure, sometimes sharing is healthy, especially when it's purposeful. But too often, repetition becomes a crutch. We keep telling the same painful story, not because it helps, but because we're hoping someone's understanding will somehow heal us. It won't. What heals you is action. What heals you is the decision to move forward. What heals you is the moment you stop memorizing your pain like a script and start choosing something new. And here's something most people don't realize. Your brain is always listening. It believes what you tell it. So if you keep repeating the narrative of defeat, your brain accepts it as truth. If you truly want to change your life, you have to start by changing the way you speak about it. That includes the words you say to others, and especially the words you whisper to yourself when no one's around. You can't plant seeds of growth and water them with words of limitation. You can't say, "I want to rise," while speaking from a place of staying stuck. So start saying something different. Start saying, "I'm figuring it out. I'm healing. I don't have all the answers, but I'm moving forward anyway." These aren't just affirmations. They're directions for your life. They're small shifts in identity that eventually become huge shifts in reality. When you speak from that place, even if it feels awkward or unfamiliar at first, your brain follows. Your mindset begins to change. Your decisions change. Your habits evolve. And your life? It starts to mirror the new story you're telling. Because the most powerful story you'll ever tell is the one you tell yourself. So stop rehearsing the version of you that keeps you small. Stop repeating the identity that's rooted in pain. Feel it, learn from it, but then, let it go. Choose to write a new narrative. One where you're not the victim, but the victor. Where your past isn't your prison, but your platform. And in the next part, we'll talk about exactly how to live from that platform. How to make your inner shift visible in your outer world. Let's continue with page 9.